עשה לאיש ומצאה איש בעיר ושכב עמה והוצאתם את שניהם אל שער העיר ההיא וסקלתם אותם באבנים ומתו את הנערה הדבר אשר לא צעקה בעיר ואת האיש הדבר אשר עינה את אשת רעהו וביארת הרע מקרבך ואם בשדה ימצא האיש את הנערה המאורסה והחזיק בה האיש ושכב עמה ומת האיש אשר שכב עמה לבדו ולנערה לא תעשה דבר אין לנערה חטא מוות כי כאשר יקום איש רעהו ורצחו נפש כן הדבר הזה כי בשדה מצאה צעקה הנערה המאורסה ואין מושיע לה כי ימצא איש נערה בתולה אשר לא אורסה ותפסה ושכב עמה ונמצאו ונתן האיש השוכב עמה לאבי הנערה 50 כסף ולא תהיה לאישה תחת אשר עינה לא יכשלך כל ימיו לא ייקח איש את אשת אביו ולא יגלה כנף אביו לא יבוא וצועק דקה וכרות שופחה בקהל אדוני לא יבוא ממזר מקהל אדוני גם דור עשירי לא יבוא לו בקהל אדוני לא יבוא עמוני ומואבי מקהל אדוני גם דור עשירי לא יבוא להם בקהל אדוני עד עולם הדבר אשר לא קידמו אתכם בלחם ובמים בדרך בצאתכם ממצרים באשר שכר עליך את בלעם בן בעור מפתור הרם נהריים לקללך ולא אבה אדוני אלוהיך לשמוע אל בלעם ויהפוך אדוני אלוהיך לך את הקללה לברכה כי אהבך אדוני אלוהיך לא תדרוש שלומם וטובתם כל ימיך לעולם.
So we were discussing also some of the rules of marriage and divorce, some of which again seem quite connected to the modern world and some of which a little bit less so. As we get to the fourth reading on page 1123, chapter 23, verse 8, I find it interesting, these first two lines, Lo tetzaev adomi, ki achicha hu. Don't hate the Edomite, because he is your brother, he is your kinsman. Lo tetzaev mitzri, ki ger hayiti be'artzo. Don't hate the Egyptian, you are a stranger in his land. And it's fascinating, we might have thought that after hundreds of years of slavery, the Egyptians, who we celebrated their God's revenge, letting them drown in the sea after they were trying to kill us, you would think that we would focus on the slavery, the journey from slavery to freedom, but instead here we're reminded that before the time of slavery, we were guests in the land of Egypt. And so even with all the abhorrent and challenging things that the Egyptians did to the Jewish people, we're still reminded to show respect. And I am, in many ways, blown away by that statement. It's reminding us that, our sins are our own, our blessings are our own to a certain extent, and we can't pin responsibility for everything on one nation at any time or forevermore. That all have the opportunity to do tshuva and to repent and to make better choices in the generations to come. Seems like a good message as we are getting ready for Rosh Hashanah in this month of Elul, that we can do better. Our children can do better, our grandchildren can do better, and it's not just upon our past. So chapter 23, verse 8, page 1123.
לא תתעב אדומי כי אחיך הוא, לא תתעב מצרי כי גר היית בארצו, בנים אשר ייוולדו להם דור שלישי, יבוא להם בקהל אדוני, כי תצא מחנה על אויביך, ונשמרת מכל דבר רע. כי יהיה בך איש אשר לא יהיה טהור מקרה לילה, ויצא אל מחוץ למחנה, לא יבוא אל תוך המחנה. והיה לפנות ערב ירחץ במים, וכבוא השמש יבוא אל תוך המחנה, ויד תהיה לך מחוץ למחנה, ויצאת שמה חוץ, ויתד תהיה לך על אזנך, והיה בשבתך חוץ, וחפרת בה ושבת וכיסית את צאתך, כי אדוני אלוהיך מתהלך בקרב מחנה, להצילך ולתת אויביך לפניך, והיה מחנך קדוש, לא יראה בך ערוות דבר ושב מאחריך, לא תסגיר עבד אל אדוניו, אשר ינצל אליך מעם אדוניו, עמך ישב בקרבך, במקום אשר יבחר, באחד שעריך בטוב לו, לא תוננו, לא תהיה קדשה מבנות ישראל, לא יהיה קדש מבני ישראל, לא תביא את נזונה ומחיר כלב, בית אדוני אלוהיך לכל נדר, כי תועבת אדוני אלוהיך גם שניהם. לא תשיך לאחיך נשך כסף, נשך אוכל, נשך כל דבר אשר יישך. לנוכרי תשיך ולאחיך לא תשיך, למען יברכך אדוני אלוהיך בכל משלח ידיך על הארץ אשר אתה ושם על רשתה. כי תדור נדר לאדוני אלוהיך, לא תאחר לשלמו, כי דרוש ידרשנו אדוני אלוהיך מעמך, והיה בך חטא, וכי תחדל לנדור, לא תהיה בך חטא, מוצאת שפתיך תשמור ועשית, כאשר נדרת לאדוני אלוהיך נדבה, אשר דיברת בפיך.
The fifth reading is found on page 1127, chapter 23, verse 25. And we see some different relationships again here. One of them is about relationship between a man and wife, and that relationship doesn't always work. That way, elsewhere in the in the rabbinic tradition, it says that the Holy One cries when the first spouses separate. But at the same time, it is a mitzvah to give a get. That if a relationship is so broken it cannot be repaired, there is actually an obligation to divorce. And I think that is one major difference in the Jewish tradition with some of our neighbors of different faiths, because in some of those faiths divorce is seen as a sin. And that is certainly not the case in the Jewish tradition. Now, again, the desire is for people to have long-lasting partnerships, long-lasting marriages. But we know this is not a perfect world, and that doesn't work for each and every person in this world. And as such, there are times when it is a much better choice to separate than to remain together. And we see that in this week's Parsha, starting again, page 1127, chapter 23, verse 25.
כי תבוא בחרם ריחה ואכלת ענבים כנפשך שובעך ואל קרייך לא תיתן כי תבוא בקמת ריחה וכתבת מלילות בידיך וחרמש לא תניף על קמת ריחה כי כך איש אישה ובעלה והיה אם לא תמצא חן בעיניו כי מצא בה ערוות דבר וכתב לה ספר כריתות ונתן בידה ושילחה מביתו ויצאה מביתו והלכה והייתה לאיש אחר ושנאה איש אחרון וכתב לה ספר כריתות ונתן בידה ושילחה מביתו או כי ימות האיש האחרון אשר לקחה לו לאישה לא יוכל בעלה הראשון אשר שילחה לשוב לקחתה להיות לו לאישה אחרי אשר הוא טמאה כי תועבה היא לפני אדוני ולא תחתים את הארץ אשר אדוני אלוהיך נותן לך נחלה.
On page 1128, chapter 24, verse 5, we see the desire for a person to have a good start to their marriage. That if a couple have just married, then they are not, the individual is not to be sent to war, but instead should remain home and should have a year together to establish their household before going on from there. We also have reminders of poverty, and that if we've lent money to someone who is not well off, we cannot take as a pawn, take as a collateral something that would prevent them from earning their living and also from paying us back eventually. But a reminder to allow this person to live their life to the best of their ability, even in times of stress. I think one of the most fascinating reminders at the end of this reading on the next page, that if there's a needy person, you shall not go to sleep in his pledge. You must return the pledge to him at sundown, that he may sleep in his cloth and bless you, and it will be to your merit before God. That if they've literally given you their last blanket as collateral for this loan, you have to give it back to them each and every night. You can keep it during the day when they don't need it, but at night you have to give them their blanket so that they shouldn't be cold. And there's something really beautiful in that. So we continue on page 1128, chapter 24, verse 5.
כי כך איש אישה חדשה לא יצא בצבא ולעבור עליו לכל דבר, נקי יהיה לביתו שנה אחת, ושימח את אשתו אשר לקח. לא יחבור חיים ברכב, כי נפש הוא חובל. כי מצא איש גונב נפש מאחיו מבני ישראל, והתעמר בו ומכרו, ומת הגנב ההוא, וביארת הרע מקרבך. הישמר בנגע הצרת, לשמור מאוד ולעשות ככל אשר יורו אתכם הכהנים הלוויים, כאשר ציוויתים תשמרו לעשות. זכור את אשר עשה אדוני אלוהיך למרים בדרך בצאתכם ממצרים, כי תשב רעך משת מאומה, לא תבוא אל ביתו לאבות אבותו, בחוץ תעמוד, והאיש אשר אתה נושב בו יוציא אליך את האבות החוצה. ואם איש עני הוא, לא תשכב באבותו, השב תשיב לו את האבות כבוא השמש, ושכב בשלמתו וברכך, ולך תהיה צדקה לפני אדוני אלוהיך.
The seventh reading begins on page 1130, chapter 24, verse 14, and leads us through the rest of the parsha. It also has some interesting mitzvot within it. One that is a mitzvah that you can't do on purpose. We can't choose to forget or overlook a sheaf of grain when we're harvesting. And yet, if we do that, then those forgotten sheaves are to go to those who need it. It's the strangers, the orphan, the widows, to ensure that they will have something to eat. So it's interesting that so much of our law does have intention as a relevant concept, and yet there are those like that one there that intention is not required, and in fact, it is the inattention that is required. So chapter 24, verse 14 of the book of Deuteronomy, page 1130.
לא תשוק שכיר עני ואביון מאחיך או מגרך אשר בארצך בשעריך, ביומו תיתן צגרו ולא תבוא עליו השמש, כי עני הוא ואליו הוא נושא את נפשו. ולא יקרא אליך אל אדוני והיה בך חטא. לא ימתו אבות על בנים ובנים לא ימתו על אבות, איש בחטאו יומתו. לא תטה משפט גר יתום ולא תחבול בגד אלמנה. וזכרת כי עבד היית במצרים, ויפתך אדוני אלוהיך משם, על כן אנוכי מצווך לעשות את הדבר הזה. כי תקצור קצירך ושונאך, ושכחת אומר בשדה. לא תשוב לקחתו לגר, ליתום ולאלמנה יהיה, למען יברכך אדוני אלוהיך בכל מעשה ידיך. כי תחבוט זיתך, לא תפאר אחריך, לגר, ליתום ולאלמנה יהיה. כי תבצור כרמך לא תעולל אחריך לגר ליתום ולאלמנה יהיה וזכרת כי עבד היית בארץ מצרים על כן אנוכי מצווך לעשות את הדבר הזה כי יריב בין אנשים וניגשו אל המשפט ושפטום והצדיקו את הצדיק והרשיעו את הרשע והיה אם בנהקות הרשע והפילו השופט והיכהו לפניו כדי רשעתו במספר 40 יכנו לא יוסיף פן יוסיף להכותו על אלה מכה רבה ונקלע אחיך לעיניך לא תחסום שור בדישו כי ישבו אחים יחדיו ומת אחד מהם ובין לו לא תהיה אשת המת החוצה לאיש זר יבמה יבוא עליה ולקחה לו לאישה ויבמה והיה המכור אשר תלד יקום על שם אחיו המת ולא יימחה שמו מישראל ואם לא יכפות האיש לקחת את יבימתו ועתה יבימתו השערה אל הזקנים ואמרה מאין יבמי להקים לאחיו שם ישראל לא אביה במי וקראו לו זקני עירו ודיברו אליו ואמר לו חפצתי לקחתה ונקשר יבימתו אליו לעיני הזקנים וגלצה נעלו מהרגלו וירקה בפניו וענתה ואמרה ככה יעשה לאיש אשר לא יבנה את בית אחיו ונקרא שמו בישראל בית חלוץ הנעל כי נצו אנשים יחדיו איש ואחיו וקרבה אשת האחד להציל את אישה מיד מכהו ושלחה ידה והחזיקה במבושיו וקצותה את כפה לא תחוס עיניך לא יהיה לך מכיסך אבן באבן גדולה וקטנה לא יהיה לך בביתך איפה ואיפה גדולה וקטנה אבן שלמה וצדק יהיה לך איפה שלמה וצדק יהיה לך למען יאריכו ימיך על האדמה אשר אדוני אלוהיך נותן לך כי תועבת אדוני אלוהיך כל עושה ענה כל עושה עוול זכור את אשר עשה לך עמלק בדרך בצאתכם ממצרים אשר קרך בדרך ויזנם לך כל הנחשלים אחריך ואתה עייף ויגע ולא ירא אלוהים בהניח אדוני אלוהיך לך מכל אויביך מסביב בארץ אשר אדוני אלוהיך נותן לך נחלה לרשתה תמחה את זכר עמלק מתחת השמיים לא תשכח.
We rise for the Chatzi Kaddish.
יתקנה ויקנה שמי רבה.
Amen.
בעלמא דברה כנוצה וימליך מלכותי מלכי כל חיים בישראל בגלה בזמן קריב אמרו אמן.
ישמרה מברך לעולם לעולמי יתברך.
יתברך משתבח פרטו וינשא וידבר ויתעלה ויתעלל שמר קודשה
ברכו
לעילה מנקום וגדה ושירתה תשבחתה ונעמתה דמירה בעלמה ואמרו אמן.
The Maftir Aliyah is on page 1135, chapter 25, verse 17. We remember to forget. The verses of Amalek. We read Parshat Zachor, we read this brief paragraph on the Shabbat before Purim to remind us that Haman is seen as a descendant of Amalek. To see that in almost every generation we have seen a descendant of Amalek, someone who has gone after the least among us, the weak among us, the sick among us, the elderly among us, and tried to eliminate the Jewish people in one way or another. Amalek is this representative of all that is evil in the world. And I think of the Psalms of Friday night, where we're reminded that those who love good, who love God, hate evil. And it seems like such a strong statement to hate evil. But it's a reminder that if we don't work to eliminate evil, then it comes back again and again and again. I think of, every superhero movie out there. If the villain remains, we know the villain will come back and will cause more havoc in the future. It's a challenging command. It's not one that we appreciate, but we have to remember that evil is out there, and it does need a continual fight if we ever want to see a world that is truly at peace. So page 1135, chapter 25, verse 17.
זכור את אשר עשה לך עמלק בדרך בצאתכם ממצרים אשר קרך בדרך ויזנהם בך כל הנחשלים אחריך ואתה עייף ויגע לא ירא אלוהים בהניח אדוני אלוהיך לך מכל אויביך מסביב בארץ אשר אדוני אלוהיך נותן לך נחלה לרשתה תמחה את זכר עמלק מתחת השמיים לא תשכח.
If I didn't remember to tell you to sit, you can sit. We'll turn now to the fifth Haftarah of consolation, reminding us that we are getting much closer to Rosh Hashanah, which we will soon be able to celebrate together. God willing, the virus numbers will continue to decline in our area, and in the coming week you'll be able to sign up for those who would like to join us in person and in small numbers for sections of the service. We'll invite you for the first day and second day of Rosh Hashanah for the Torah reading and for the Musaf. We'll invite you for Kol Nidre, Tashlich, outside. And on the day of Yom Kippur itself, those who would like to join us in small numbers with reservation and social distancing and all that will be able to come for the Torah service and Yizkar and the opening of Musaf, although the conclusion of Musaf is just a little too long, so we'll have to send you home to get the end of that. But we're trying to make space, trying to work together to bring holiness into this world and make sure that everyone can participate. So everything will be streamed this way. That will give you an opportunity to participate in the service, whether you are safely able to join us or are not in a health position that works, or So I'm looking forward to those times. I'm looking forward to seeing a few more faces and knowing that we are in this together. So our Haftorah today begins on page 1138 in our Chumash. It's the book of Isaiah, chapter 54, just a few verses, 1 through 10, reminding us that God is calling us back. God is saying, I have a covenant, I have a brit with you, that my loyalty will never move from you, my covenant of friendship, my covenant of peace will never be broken, that God will take us back in love, that even as we have sinned, even as we have been imperfect, even as we have not always made the right choices, we have the opportunity now to make better ones, to do tshuva, to return to our best self. So we'll see some of that in this Haftorah, page 1138, Isaiah 54. Ronia kara lo yalada, pitzi verina havatzalni lachala, kirabim b'nei shomimah. Nebula Amar Adonai Harvi Mekomo Halech Virot Mishkanotayich Yatu Al Tachsechi Arichi Metarayich Vetedotayich Hazeki Ki Yamin Usmol Tifrotzi Zarech Goyim Yirash Ve'arim Neshamot Yoshivim. We'll get back to the land of Israel, return to our cities, and spread out to the right and the left throughout the land. Al tir'i ki lo tevoshi ve'al tikalmi ki lo tachpiri ki voshet alomayich tishkachi Verpat alamnotayich lo tizkriyon ki vo'alayich osayich Adonai tzvaot shemo Begoalech kedosh Yisrael Eloi kol haaretz yikarem Ki keisha azova V'tzva ruach karach Adonai V'she'norim Ki tima'es amar Elohayich B'rega katon azavtich U'rachamim gedolim akabtzech B'shetef katzef histarti Panai raga mimech U'v'chesed olam Rechamtich amar golech Adonai. I hid my face from you. I hid my face from you, says God. But with kindness everlasting I will take you back in love, says God, our Redeemer. Himei noach soli asher nishbati me'avor mei noach od al haaretz Ken nishbati miktof alayich u'migarbach Ki achrim yamoshu v'agvaot motena v'azdi meitech lo yamosh v'ovrin shlomi lahatamot Amar meramech Adonai. We turn now to the blessing for our community, page 148. Kumporkan min shemaya inavis daracham evayarechim azanaravicha.
HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yeshalem Zcharam V'yasir mehem kol machala V'yirpa lechol gufam V'yislach lechol avonam ברכה והצלחה בכל מעשה ידיהם עם כל ישראל אחיהם ונאמר אמן.
We rise together at the bottom of 148, giving thanks for our great country, for the gift of the United States of America. Our God and God of our ancestors, we ask your blessing for our country, for its government, its leaders and advisors, and all who exercise just and rightful authority. Teach them insights from your Torah that they may administer all affairs of state fairly, that peace and security, happiness and prosperity, justice and freedom may forever abide in our midst. Creator of all flesh, bless all the inhabitants of our country with your spirit. May citizens of all races and creeds forge a common bond in true harmony, to banish hatred and bigotry and to safeguard the ideals and the free institutions of the pride and glory of our country. May this land under your providence be an influence for good throughout the world, uniting all people in peace and freedom, helping them to fulfill the vision of your prophet. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they experience war anymore. And let us say, Amen. And before we go for the prayer for the state of Israel, I am aware that both the Democrats and the Republicans have chosen their candidates in the presidential election this fall. And it seems in this moment that people may think we live in red states and blue states, that we get this tribal identity with a political party and forget the human being in front of us. And I don't live in a red state, and I don't live in a blue state, I don't even live in a purple state. I live in these United States of America. And I know that whether I agree or disagree with the politics of another human being, they can still be in our community. They can still be my friend, even if I think what they're voting for is completely nuts, completely bonkers, completely off the pale, out of this world. But I want to remember that each and every person that I see is a human being, no matter what hat they put on their head, no matter what flag they wave, that we in this country have come together as citizens and we have tried to be a light into the nations for generations. Sometimes we've done that extraordinarily well, and sometimes we absolutely have not. But no matter who we choose to vote for in November, I pray that we are doing it with a desire for good, a desire for unity, a desire to remember that we are all Americans, that we are all here and we're all in this together. So that is part of my prayer for our country. On page 149, we turn to the prayer for the state of Israel. Avinu Shebashamayim, Sur Yisrael v'Goalo Barek et Medinat Yisrael Reshit Tzmichat Gulatenu. Hagen alecha b'efrat azdecha ufros alecha sukat shlomecha. Ushlach orcha v'amitcha lerashecha sarecha v'atzecha. V'taknem be'etzat tova milfanecha. Hazek itidei mignei eretz kadshenu vanhilem Eloheinu Yeshua. V'ateret netzachon ta'atrem v'natata shalom ba'aretz v'simchat olam lo shveha v'nomar amen. You may be seated. I want us to read also very appropriate in this moment, the personal meditation at the bottom of 149. Avinu Malkeinu. Let's change it to our. Bless our families with peace. Teach us to appreciate the treasures of our lives. Help us to find contentment in one another. Save us from dissension and jealousy. Shield us from pettiness and rivalry. May selfish pride not divide us, and may pride in one another unite us. Help us to renew our love for one another continually. In the light of your Torah, grant us, the people of Israel, and all your children everywhere, health and fulfillment, harmony, peace, and joy. And let us say, Amen. So I pray for that for our community and for our country. At the bottom of 151, we'll sing Ashrei.
Ashrei Yoshvevitecha Od Yalelu Chasela
Ashrei Hamshikach Elo Ashnai Eloah Tilal David Arimcha Melech V'Varshim Elalam Vohed Melech Melech Ulu Rashim Asach Kakvortzach Hayagitu Ano Kabaldech Amen. Duznartech Amen V'Vasa Prana Zecharatum Tumana Yakapayim Kol Hatzed Tovna Kol Kamasa Hamilchim פותח את ידיך ומזמן רצון צדיק אדוני לפניו. אנחנו נדבר גם את זה ולעולם, הללויה.
תהילת אדוני ידבר פי מברך כל מסר שגדול אליו בהן, ואנחנו נברך יה מעתה ועד עולם, הללויה.
So I want to share a few words of Torah this morning. Parshat Kiteitzei has many laws. With 74 mitzvot, it actually has more commandments in this section of Torah than in any other parsha of the year. And we learn so many that seem right in this moment, ensuring honesty in business, compassion to the less fortunate, so on and so forth. Over and over, the love of God, God's love for us, and our love for God is emphasized. And the connection between the people, between the nation, between us and one another, even between us and ourselves, is reinforced. And yet there are some laws that seem a little less applicable in the modern world. The Torah opens this week, Ki Teitzei Lemilchama, that when you go out to war, you cannot take a captive and immediately have a relationship with her. This is assuming men were the only ones going to war, and that rape and pillage was part of the standard practice. And the Torah says, no, we don't rape, we don't pillage as part of war. And if we, as a soldier, were to meet a woman through the act of war, she has to be treated with respect. She has to be given time to mourn the loss of her family and her culture before given the choice to be a part of ours. So I'm glad that that law is no longer, I'll say, needed. And I think as terrible and violent, as horrific as war is, even to the modern age, because we know that it leaves so much death and destruction in its path, at least that one small piece is not part of our story today. There's one mitzvah that strikes me every time I read it. And as a parent of young children, it feels especially painful. Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 18 through 21, if a man has a wayward and a defiant son who does not heed his father or mother, and does not obey them even after they discipline him, his father and mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of the town, and say, this son of ours is disloyal and defiant. He does not heed us. He's a glutton and a drunkard. And thereupon the men of the town stone him to death. And this is how you sweep evil from your midst. All Israel will hear and be afraid. That it's cutting off that evil at the root, reminding us of that close of the Parsha of Amalek. That if someone is so terrible, we can't have them as part of our society. And yet, our tradition was deeply, deeply uncomfortable with this command. We could say, it's just not relevant, forget it, there's no child like that. But sometimes when we look at our sacred text and look at how these texts have been analyzed over the year, we can see a little bit of ourselves within it. In the Zohar and the Midrashic commentary, the mystical commentary, Moshe argues with God. That Moshe hears this and says to God, how could it be that a Jewish father and mother would take their own son to the Supreme Court and order them executed? This whole passage, Moshe says, should be deleted from the Torah. Forget it. We don't want it. And God explains that it was included to enable us to receive a reward for studying it, and was always intended and would always remain in the realm of hypothesis. This follows in accordance with the tradition of the Mishnah and the Talmud. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs writes, the child must be within 3 months of attaining maturity. Younger than that, he's a child and not applicable. Older, he's a grown-up. And this law is not applicable to him. He must have stolen money from his parents. He must use it to buy a specific amount of meat and wine. He must eat and drink it. all at once in a place not in his parents' house. So he has to steal money from his parents, go out, and eat in a public place using the stolen proceeds. And Rabbi Yehuda says that if his mother is not like his father in voice, appearance, and stature, he's not a rebellious son. So the husband and the wife, in this gender assumption of parenting, the husband and wife must be about the same size. They must have the same tenor of voice. They must be speaking with the same message to their children. The Torah had said he won't obey our voice, and therefore it is not the voice of the father or the mother, but both of theirs together, that they have to be almost identical. So they're making it almost impossible. In Talmud Sanhedrin 71, it teaches there has never been a stubborn and rebellious son, and there will never be one in the future. So why do we have it? That we can expound on the understanding of Torah and receive reward. No, it cuts out the possibility of a rebellious daughter because it says son. It cuts out all these different things to make it virtually impossible to ever convict a child of this great sin. And Rashi offers us an interesting perspective. He connects the section of the rebellious son to what was right before and right after it. The first is of that relationship where the soldier had taken a woman captive and eventually married her. And the next passage in our Torah is about a man that has more than one wife and more than one son who do not get along, and he definitely favors one son over the other. So Rashi says that the three sections together are a cautionary tale of a son who is conceived in a relationship not built on love, raised in an environment without love, with this love of one son over the other, and as a result becomes rebellious and hateful, not really knowing how to love at all. So we see this painful, challenging situation. We have an incredibly dysfunctional family. The parents are speaking in different voices. The parents are themselves in conflict. The children do not feel safe, and the children do not feel loved. Now, every family is complicated, and for those parents of young children in this moment, living together all the time can get even more complicated. But our Torah is saying that we have to have love and respect within the family. We have to have compassion within the family. We have to be unified as parents so that whether or not we look and sound exactly the same, that those partners teach children the same values, teach them the same ideas, that work together. And even, as we mentioned, it is a mitzvah to divorce, that even if parents are no longer together, they still have to find ways of educating their children with a united front. This is not saying that a parent in the modern parlance has to be a helicopter parent or a bulldozer parent pushing out any obstacle in front of their child's way, but to teach children with good midot, good values, good morals, positive characteristics. As parents and grandparents, as guardians and protectors of the next generations, we're commanded to educate our children. Our tradition teaches that a community needs a school so much, needs a teacher so much that you can even sell a Torah to pay the salary of a teacher to educate the children. And what is that Torah that we have to teach them? A Torah of loving kindness. And that Torah includes science and math and literature and philosophy. All of that is Torah. So how do we read these terrible parents or terrible child? The explanation that is to encourage us to look at that relationship. Just those few verses can show the downward spiral of a family that is not communicating. In this difficult story, the parents go to the community for help. They say, "We failed. Help us." But they seem to come just a little bit too late. What if they went at the beginning of the conversation? What if they went before he had stolen and publicly demonstrated his lack of respect for his parents? What if they went to him when they saw we're having difficulty communicating with our child? We don't know what to do with this one. We're stuck. So I think today, in one way, the lesson of this parsha may be the importance of asking for help, of saying, we can't do this alone. Please be with us. And I think that lesson is especially vital right now, because so many parents are drowning. They're being asked to be the parent, the teacher, the principal, to work, to be a productive member of society, and it is a tremendous responsibility and sometimes a burden. And as a society, as a community, we have the ability to offer help to one another, to support one another, to be there for one another. And I think that lesson has been there since time immemorial. This is the love from God and with God and to God that Moshe spoke of so often in this parsha. So I want to close with a story that some of you may have heard from me before. When I was a baby rabbinical student a number of years ago, I spent a summer doing clinical pastoral education, working in a hospital outside Atlanta. I did a unit of CPE, and it's 12 weeks or so over the summer, long days, overnight call. And I happened to be the first time they'd had a Jewish chaplain in the hospital or in the program. And the language that many of these Emory theological students, Candler seminary students used, was they would talk about being Jesus in the room. And I have to say, it took me basically the entire term to understand what the heck they meant. What does it mean to be Jesus in the room, and why is the rabbi talking about that? What it means is to walk in God's ways, to do good, to walk humbly with God, to have acts of loving kindness. You know, in our tradition, we speak of the presence of the Shekhinah, God's immanent, more feminine presence, the God of love, the God of compassion. And the thing is, we can take on that role too. When we support one another, we bring the Shekhinah into the room. When we bring a meal to someone who is homebound, we bring the Shekhinah into our presence. When we go and visit the sick, we bring the Shekhinah. When we do laundry for someone who can't do laundry, when we watch the child so somebody can go to work, when we care for the elderly, when we support the needy bride, when we do these acts of Gimilut Chasadim, we are bringing God's presence into this world. We're not God, but we're bringing godliness in. Through these godly acts, through these deeds of loving kindness, Gimilut Chasadim, we illuminate this world. So the Ben Sorer Umoreh, the rebellious son, is reminding us of the importance of bringing God's presence into this world. It's telling us that if we don't support those around us, we may end up, maybe not with the Ben Sorer Umoreh exactly, but with a person who doesn't know right from wrong. A child who doesn't know when to stop. A child who can cause harm to himself or herself and others because they didn't have enough love and support in this life. So perhaps in this moment we can offer even a virtual hand, some time to support those around us, to be together, if not physically, virtually. And I know that we have done that here at Congregation Bnai Israel, and we will continue to do some in the days and weeks and months and years to come. Shabbat Shalom. We rise and turn to the Musaf Amidah, first the Chatzi Kaddish on page 155, and then we'll turn to 156b to begin together.
Yitkadar ויתקדש שמי רבה.
אמן.
בעלמא נברא קירותי וימליך מלכותי. בחיי כל ימי כל ובחיי רבי ישראל. בגלה בזמן קריב אמרו אמן.
יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם לעולמי עולמי יתברך.
יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם וינשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי קודשה
בריחו
לעילם מגמגתה ושירתה תושמגתה ונגמרה דמירה מעלמה ואמרו אמן.
Page 156b.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu
Elohei Avoteinu, Elohei Abraham,
Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora El Elyon גומל חסרים טובים וקונה הכל וזוכר
חסדי אבות ומביא גואל לבני בניהם
למען שמו באהבה מלך עוזר פוקד מושיע ומגן ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיים מתים אתה רב להושיע, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיים מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו, לשני עפר, מי כמוך בגבורות, ומינו מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומשמיע ישועה, בנאמנת להחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיה המתים. נריצך ונקישך כסוד ציח שרפי קודש המקדישים שמך בקודש ככתוב היה נביאך וקרא זה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלך הארץ כבודו כבודו מלא מלא עולם היה מקום כבודו כבודו מלא מלא עולם
היה מקום כבודו כבודו מלא מלא עולם משרתיו שואלים שואלים זה לזה היה מקום כבודו
משרתיו שואלים שואלים זה לזה היה מקום כבודו לעומתם ברוך יאמרו
ברוך כבוד אדוני במקומו ויפת ברחמים ויחונם עם יחדים שמו ערב תמיד, פעמיים באהבה, שמע אומרים שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד.
הוא אלוהינו, Mashiachenu, ve'hu yashmi'enu, berachamav, shenit, le'nei kol chai, li'ot lachem le'Elohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Ani Adonai Elohechem nivnei kol shega katuv le'mor. Yimloch Adonai le'olam, Elohai Yitziyahu le'dor vador, Alleluia. Le'dor vador nagid kolecha, ulenetzach netzakim kinusarcha nakish. בשבחך אלוהינו מפינו לימוש למד, כי המלך גדול וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
When you finished your personal prayer, Kaddish Shalem, page 181. Amen.
בעלמא דברה כנותי וימליך מלכותי בחיי כל אבימי כל גיירי בישראל בגלה בזמן קריב אמרו אמן
יש מרב מבורך לעולם לעולם יתברך
יתברך וישבח פייצו וינשא ונדר ויתלווית הלל שמי קודשה
ברכו
לאלה במקום בגתה ושירתה תשבגתה ונגמתה דמירה מעלמה ואמרו אמן תתקבל צלבר חונך ישראל קודם אבהון וישמעיה ואמרו אמן יש לומר רבה מן שמעיה וחיים עלינו מעכו ישראל ואמרו אמן עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ולכל ישראל, ואמרו אמן.
You may be seated, page 182.
אין כאלוהינו,
אין כאדוננו, אין כמלכנו, אין כמושיענו, מי כאלוהינו, מי כאדוננו, מי כמלכנו, מי כמושיענו. נוד אל אלוהינו, נוד אל אדוננו, נוד אל מלכנו, נוד אל מושיענו.
ברוך
אלוהינו, ברוך אדוננו, ברוך מלכנו, ברוך מושיענו. אתה הוא אלוהינו, אתה הוא אדוננו, אתה הוא מלכנו, אתה הוא מושיענו. אתה הוא שכתינו אבותינו, לפניך כתורת הסמים. We rise again for Aleinu, page 183.
עלינו לשמח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה
ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו קריאי ארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות אדמה, שלא שם מלכנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נטש שמיים מעושי הארץ, ומושב קרוב השמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו מגבי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין הון, אין מלכנו אין זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו. וידעת יום בחשבות אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ ועל הארץ מתחת. אין עוד.
אין עוד. ונאמר
אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. You may be seated. We remember today Mark Blacker, Bonnie Barbanel Gordon, Edward Luden, Gusty Winokur, Irving M. Cohen, Irving Helfand, Harold Pincus, Mendel Lefkowitz, Nancy Selleck, Frank Mantenband, Max Riskin, Joseph Spitalnik, Melvin Margulies, Gilbert William Chenkin, Eva Hyman, Joshua Aaron Mills, Samuel Rabinovich, Maurice K. Smith, Rose Fox Polsky, Rose Lesky, Stephen Ray, Ida Franco Loengard, Basha Maurer, Sovel Hershelov, Julius Kohlhagen, Rosalind Katz, Francis Grubman, Lester Litsky, Becky Yanchuk, Israel Lewis, Samuel Morris Bookbinder, Maurice Scher, Aaron B. Cohen, Lois Sackland, and Theodore A's. In their memory, we praise God's name with the Kaddish on page 184. Yitkadal v'yitkadash me'rabah.
Amen.
V'yalma divrach chirutei v'yamlech malchutei. B'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael. B'agala v'zman kariv v'yimru. Amen.
Amen.
Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevorach Le'olam Olamei Almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shmei D'Kudsha B'richu La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata damaran b'yalma v'yimru Amen. Yehi Shlam Rabba min Shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru Amen. Oseh Shalom b'imromav v'yaseh Shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru Amen. So this coming week, you should be getting some mail from us, you know, the stuff that the postman delivers, postwoman, and we'll have in there some of the information about the high holidays, about opportunities to come together physically and opportunities to come together spiritually. One of the things I'm excited to be doing is something I've done previously, but we made a bigger deal this year, of bringing the shofar around. So if you would like to hear the shofar, you want to get socially distanced a few people together, let us know, and I'm happy to come blow the shofar from a distance. We have a wonderful new executive director, Alison Spiga, who I hope you'll get an opportunity to meet virtually or in person eventually. And her contact information was in the email this week, so I'd love for you to reach out to her and get to know her a little bit better. She's working so hard to help us get everything organized and ready for the coming weeks. I want to wish Willow Bantowitz an early mazel tov on her bat mitzvah next week. We're really looking forward to it. And lots of good things going on. Byron will be teaching a class on the Musaf Amidah of Rosh Hashanah. I'm also going to be going through the prayer book of the holidays in the next few weeks. And just, you know, spirituality is not a spectator sport. If we want to really engage with our souls, we have to engage with our minds, our hearts, our whole bodies. And so in the weeks to come, I pray that you'll open a Machzor. You'll open up the High Holiday prayer book and look at those words. So you might say, Rabbi, but I don't have a High Holiday Machzor in my house. Well, guess what? You can get one. So we have 3 different ways to get the Machzor. One is we have a number of undedicated Machzorim that you can purchase, and that's yours, or you can eventually donate it back to the shul. Another option is, we love you guys. We want you to be able to participate in the service, and you can borrow a Machzor from us. So you'll take it home, and then after the holidays, bring it back. And the third option is we have got a number of copies of the Machzor digitally. So you'll download a program and set up an account with a link. It's totally free. Well, it wasn't totally free. It's our gift to you. And you'll be able to download it on an iPad, tablet, phone, computer, whatever, and it even can be set up so you can use it offline. You know, I like a book, but whatever you prefer, make sure you get your Machzor before the holidays. There will be instructions in your email and in the pamphlet and all these other ways, but we want you to be able to participate fully in the High Holiday experience. So, Shabbat Shalom. We'll conclude our service with Adon Olam, page 187.
Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Ko Yitzir Nivra Le'nasa Behefso Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Azai Melech Shemo Nikra V'acharet Kichlot HaKol Levado Yimloch Nora Ve'hu Haya Ve'hu Ove Ve'hu Yeh B'tifara Ve'hu Yeh B'tifara Ve'hu Echad Ve'en Sheni Le'am Shilo Le'achbira V'li Reshit V'li Tachrit V'lo ha'oz Ve'ha'misra V'lo ha'oz Ve'ha'misra Ve'hu Eli Ve'ai Go'ali V'tzor Hebli Ve'etzara Ve'hu Nesi Ve'nat Osri Ve'nat Kosi Ve'yom Mekra Ve'nat Kosi Ve'yom Mekra V'yado Avkid Ruchi
ותשען והעירה ואירועי גבייתי אדוני לי ולא יירא
Adonai li velo ira.
I wish Yashar Koach to Chazan Schultz. I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. May this be a week of peace and blessing, of fulfillment, and especially of study. Let this be a time as we get closer to the holidays that we delve into our texts, we delve into our soul, and we reach out to our friends and family side by side, whether it's virtually or if you're safely able to gather physically, to wish you, those you love, Shabbat Shalom. Take care.